You know what
Backpacking America
is, right?
It's fucking awesome.
It's Backpacking America, an analytical podcast. Moving out? Moving in? Apartment or home in need of detailing? Call Innate Deep Cleaning Services at 845-243-7709 for some of the best home detailing you could ever ask for. Once again, that is 845-243-7709.
I'd like to welcome everyone to Breaking It Down. Frank MacKay here. So much more importantly, our subject today is the Ukrainian conflict. Let's call it what it is: the war, the Russian war on Ukraine, and what's going on right now. For the most part, is something that we really first started focusing on as a public, or the general public, as of February 24th, 2022. But obviously, we know that there's something preceded that, and the history before, I think, is very important for folks to understand. Someone who understands this conflict as well as anyone is Anthony Barone. He is the host of Backpacking America, and he's also a producer here at LI News Radio. If you're listening on LI News Radio, you can get in touch with Anthony through here. He's a producer, and he's in charge of the social media here. But he also has a keen eye and a background in the Soviet Union and the former Soviet Union, the history there, and certainly what's going on here in the Ukraine. Anthony Barone, welcome.
Thanks, Frank, for having me on. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, listen, excited to have you. And if you don't mind, give us a little bit, give us a tiny bit of your background before we go on and talk about the background of the conflict. And if you don't mind, give us a little bit of your history. Where were you born? Where were you raised?
Yeah, sure. So before I get into the background of all this stuff, I was born in Long Island, raised here my whole life. I over the summers I would visit family upstate, and I kind of have a well-rounded viewpoint of New York State. I ended up going to college at Oneonta for the last 4 years. Lived up there for 4 years, and fell in love with it. I love nature and all that stuff. So how did I get involved with, Soviet history and, left history, labor history? I just find it very interesting. I found, I wanted to get involved in politics when I was quite young, and nothing really stuck with me. And I just found, the lefternmost viewpoint very interesting. And I studied the Soviet Union because it looked like a unique social experiment, much like the United States was a unique and is still a unique social experiment at the world stage. It was the first worker state to ever exist, and a lot of the problems that communism faced in the middle to late 20th century and even in today's China could be rooted back to the experiments in the Soviet Union. So it was quite fascinating, and that's why I have this ability to talk about this subject. And it's a very complicated subject. So even though I know kind of what's going on, no one really knows what's going on, because at the end of the day, we live in America. We're a whole ocean away from this conflict.
So many people, myself, I'll include in that group, stopped paying close attention to Russia once the Soviet Union fell, and others, like yourself, didn't. If you can, where does this conflict, where does this war find its genesis? Where would you say was the starting point when they write about this, when they talk about this, when they discuss this years later? What do you think the starting point of the genesis of this will be?
It was the lead up to the fall of the Soviet Union during the Gorbachev years, absolutely, with Perestroika and Glasnost. It was at that time that ethnic tensions started to rise because the breakdown of the Soviet state was in full effect. Basically, when the Soviet Union was a one-party state and everything had to be done through the socialist perspective of we're all workers, we're not Ukrainian, we're not Russian, we're not Kazakh, we're workers, we're Soviets. Once that broke down and people were able to form their own committees and their own parties and their own organizations and their own newspapers, these ethnic tensions started to rise. And when the Soviet state completely capitulated and all chaos broke loose, we saw these ethnic tensions rise. There were, riots in the streets. The post-Soviet states, there were, ethnic discriminations against the varying groups, against Tatars, Chechens, Jews. There was a lot of that going on. So basically, this conflict, because of that destabilization, it's directly linked to that. Now, after the fall of the Soviet Union, Eastern Ukraine is heavily Russian, as you know, and they, in 2010, elected Yanukovych, who was the president elected in 2010 in Ukraine. And, it was kind of a unifying figure. The Eastern Ukrainians were kind of like, the Western Ukrainians were like, okay, Ukraine is kind of stable. We want to be more aligned with Europe and European ideals, but this guy's keeping us together right now, I guess. And the Eastern Ukrainians in Donbass and Luhansk were very ecstatic because they had, someone that was from the East and had Russian descent, so they felt good. And now this is where, Ukraine basically is now playing this balance between two ethnic groups that have tensions because the Soviet concept of a nation state was completely blown out of the water. So we now have the Western conception of what a nation state is. So there's a lot of ethnic tension that comes with that. So what ends up happening is by 2014, we have the Ukrainian Revolution. So the Ukrainian Revolution was due to, I'm trying to get my compass all direction. The Western part of Ukraine wanting to join Europe, and the eastern part wanting to remain Russian. There was also economic turmoil and corruption charges. It was very corrupt. Ukraine was very corrupt, as all post-Soviet states were post-1991. There was a lot of prostitution, drug dealing, racketeering. Privatization was so quick and so lopsided that everyone just got put over. So that's where it all starts, is massive corruption from the decline of the post-Soviet state. That order is completely gone. That's like if the United States broke up into 16 different countries and we were all just like, what the hell do we do now?
Right. Well, hey, listen, keep your thought. Let me remind folks that this is Frank MacKay. Much more importantly, Anthony Barone is our very special guest, and we're talking about the origin of this conflict, of this war in the Ukraine. Again, we've, I've been over there, and I've kind of seen it from a different perspective, and we're all watching it now. We're seeing the refugee situation develop, which is a humanitarian crisis second to none going on in this world, and everything that we're seeing it kind of starts somewhere around February 24th, 2022. But obviously, that's not where this all started. Anthony's kind of giving us perspective of where to look back. Frank MacKay here once again. Anthony Barone, host of Backpacking America, is our very special guest. Anthony, go back there. You're somewhere around 2014, and continue from there. How do we get from 2014 to February 24th, 2022?
Well, that's a lot, too. I have to actually jump back to 2000, and then we can go back to 2014, and it'll be very quick.
Yeah.
But in 2000, Russia wanted to apply for NATO membership. They just did not want to go through the same process as everyone else. So according to George Robertson, who was the former leader of NATO between 1999 and 2003, Putin wanted to be part of the secure and stable West that Russia was out of. And he also recalls Putin saying, when are you going to invite us to join NATO, when in fact, you have to apply to join NATO. And he said, well, I don't want to stand in line with a lot of countries that don't matter. So because it didn't necessarily go Russia's way, according to Robertson, they decided to pursue their own path. They wanted to be seen as equals, and that means, listen, we used to be the Soviet Union. We're still powerful. Let us in. They didn't want to wait their turn. So that's where this all began, where they're like now trying to create their own geopolitical entity. So to go to 2014, there were claims of genocide and repression by Eastern Ukrainians from Western Ukrainians. Eastern Ukraine, Luhansk and Donetsk, and Crimea, they're mostly Russian ethnicity because they're also, bordering Russia. So that just makes sense. And in 2014, the Russians saw that there was, ethnic tension brewing in Crimea. So they moved into, under the guise of protecting Russians from genocide by the Ukrainians. And they were given a referendum choice. And in this referendum choice, they only had they had two options, and they were both to separate from Ukraine. Just how did you want to separate from Ukraine? There was no status quo option, according to Ukrainian officials. So then, after this shortly, Luhansk and Donetsk had revolts because at that time Euromaidan was going on, which was an attempt by the rest of Ukraine to join the European Union. And I'm not sure if NATO membership was included in that, but they definitely wanted to be closer to Europe. So they overthrew Yanukovych and tried to install a democratic government. So the Eastern republics decided to say, hey, we're going to break away and we're going to form our own republic. So there was the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic. And then Russia was like, well, these could be our allies. So what they did was around 2017, I believe, they were giving arms, munitions, economic support. And then it's alleged that they moved in some soldiers there, some advisors, maybe a few hundred combat personnel troops between the two republics. And it wasn't until, this whole thing broke out, this Russo-Ukrainian War, as I call it, that Luhansk and Donetsk were officially recognized by the Russian Federation.
Frank MacKay here once again. If you're just joining us or if you're just turning on your radio a little late, Anthony Barone is the voice that you're hearing. Frank MacKay here with Anthony, who is a producer at LI News Radio, and he's also the host of Backpacking America, which talks about a lot of things other than just backpacking. That's the title, but he gets into a lot on their very in-depth show, and it should be checked out, and you can kind of see that, hear that, I should say, and just about anywhere on the internet, anywhere they have podcasts. You can check out Backpacking America with Anthony Barone. Frank MacKay here with Anthony. Anthony, when you get to a point when you start talking about Russia thinking that there could be an ally in the making here, and again, that's probably the kindest way to couch that or to look at that. But at the same time, Putin has been watching the Ukraine for a very long time. And why wouldn't he? I mean, this is his neighbor. This is his bailiwick. At what point does Putin get to the point where he doesn't feel like he can control the outcome? Did he ever feel that he can control the outcome of the leadership in Ukraine?
Well, that's complicated. I mean, I feel like he still can. I feel like he still understands that he thinks he can control the outcome in Ukraine. And even if he feels he doesn't, he knows he has to. Ukraine and the East, so Belarus, Ukraine, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, they are all the buffer states of Russia's interior. So historically, without those states, Russia is incredibly weakened because it can't it loses hundreds, if not over 1,000 kilometers to drag out a potential invader before they get to the gates of Moscow. That's been in the Russian military playbook for centuries. So it's a matter of survival that they look and monitor Ukraine, and that's also the reason that in the aftermath of the Soviet Union collapsing, the CIS states, so that's the CSTO states, said, listen, we need NATO to not expand beyond its borders because that puts our national securities at risk if NATO expands. So that is, and obviously NATO did that. So Russia feels trapped, and the CSTO states feel trapped, and even if they don't think they can control the outcome, they have to, because in their mind it's a matter of life or death for their way of life and their countries.
Is it too simplistic to just say that Putin envisions recreating the Soviet Union?
No, I dislike that so much because Russia's not a socialist or communist state. It is the farthest thing from it. The workers don't own the means of production. There's no, democratic centralism occurring in the government. The Communist Party is the second largest party, but it exists in a parliamentary system and it's controlled opposition. It's not socialist. So when people say to recreate the Soviet Union, they think, oh, communism's coming back and the USSR will be returned. I think
not to interrupt, but I think when people mention that, they're thinking more about the real estate of the Soviet Union and not the communism behind it, because I certainly no one thinks that Putin is a communist.
Oh, you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised. A lot of people still think that. That's the only reason I had to go off on that tangent. Like, me and you both understand that it's the real estate aspect. Do I think that he wants that? I mean, if America was in that position, and the Eastern Seaboard became parts of different countries or independent countries with different alliances, and all that was left of America was Texas, Alabama, and Louisiana, I'd be pretty cornered and wanting some of that back. Sure. I think he definitely wants that back. He wants that territory back. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, do you think? And one of the other things, and I just left the show where we were. I just hung up with the show where we brought up this very same subject, but people are reacting as if this is a very difficult situation for the Russians, and again, I'm not saying it's not, but let's keep in mind that the invasion, the war, technically, the start date will probably end up being historically February 24th, 2022. We're not even at April 1st as we speak here. By the time people hear it, we'll be in April 1st, but we're just at April when it comes to it. I mean, this has not been a very long time. If anyone was thinking that Russia was just going to go in and in a couple of weeks just take over the Ukraine, I mean, I don't think they've been paying attention to the history over there. I mean, Afghanistan and Russia was a long, dragged-out war, and many of the other conflicts that Russia has had and we, the United States, have had. It's not like this is the Gulf War where they knocked out Saddam Hussein's army within 30 days or anything like that. I don't know where anyone got the idea that this was going to be a 2-week war for Putin. I mean, address that if you would.
Well, a lot of people feel that way just because of how the Russian military presents. The Afghan invasion example from the Soviet Union made sense as to why it dragged on, because they were fighting a guerrilla war, and the Soviet state was it was rotting from the inside out in 1979. Those are the years of Brezhnev, and he was the beginning of the end, really, after Khrushchev and the other guy that died after 30 days. Really, after the Khrushchev period.
Andropov.
Yes, Andropov. Yeah, him. Yeah. So after Khrushchev and reforming everything without a real basis. Anyway, the state ended up collapsing. So that I could understand why people would discount that. And a lot of people, the stereotype is Russia strong. But Russia also hasn't been involved in a war, so all they had was the legacy of the Soviet Union and the big military parades and the training and the fact they sent off, intelligence cruisers off the coast of Connecticut multiple times, and they, challenged the U.S. Air Force over the Bering Strait. These are things that made it seem like, okay, they ain't playing around. They're taking this serious, So a lot, and what do you hear about Ukraine? You don't really hear much about Ukraine. A lot of people think that Ukraine also doesn't have that legacy and also wasn't part of the Soviet. There's a very Russo-centric thinking when it comes to a Western perspective of the Soviet Union, that it was all Russia. When people refer to the Soviet Union too, they refer to Russia. They don't refer to Ukraine or Kazakhstan or Azerbaijan. It's very Russocentric. So that's probably why a lot of people mistakenly thought, Ukraine is some backwater, Eastern European country, and Russia's some superpower, you know. The thing is, too, is that they underestimate that conventional warfare is dead. Now civilians take up arms. Now civilians lead, you know, terror campaigns in the mountains. It takes 3 people to destroy a tank column. Now, you know, you could just be driving along the way and then you throw a Molotov out your window and you go get your groceries after. You know, resistance becomes just a part of your day-to-day. And a lot of people forget that now, you know. Like if that happened in America, I know, you know, people would be going on their way to work and they, you know, if there was an invading army, they'd throw a backpack bomb in a building and then, you know, go get a sandwich after. That's what warfare is now. It's incredibly horizontal in its application.
Anthony, we appreciate your time here. Obviously, for those listening that like to hear us continue, you'll be able to hear us online in a mini-series of this, a limited series on the origin of this conflict and everything that goes on, and you can keep an eye on online for with Breaking It Down and with Backpacking America to see it. Anthony, give us a website or a social media site where you can be followed, where people can kind of get an idea of what's going on with you.
Yeah, absolutely. You could find me on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, really anywhere you get your podcast. I still don't know all the sites because I'm on so many. You could also see full episodes on YouTube, our Facebook page, and our Instagram page, and it's all just Backpacking America. I monitor them regularly, so if you have a question or you want to say hi or you want to be a guest, just reach out, and I'll be glad to talk to you.
Anthony Barone, thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Frank.
Frank MacKay signing off. Anthony Barone has been our very special guest, and as we continue to talk about the war in the Ukraine and the Russian-Ukrainian war, Anthony is our latest in a series of guests. Frank MacKay signing off. We'll see you next time on Breaking It Down.
If you want more Backpacking America content, make sure to follow the social links in the podcast description. New episodes starting and ending your work week come out every Friday and Monday. Thank you again for listening, and stay breezy.